Hey everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining us today in this timely panel discussion on the future of MarTech. My name is Esther Elgos and I'm the chair of Career Development and Networking Programs at the American Marketing Association, New York, where we work every day to inspire, support, and celebrate brilliance in marketing. We are very excited to launch today our second joint event with AMA Austin, DC, and Triangle. This falls under a three-part series, each one focused on a different industry. Marketing technology is the first one, then media and entertainment, and finally healthcare in April, so stay tuned. We have a plethora of events coming up, so check out the AMA New York events page. The next one is our 5th Women in Marketing webinar on September 17 with Mani Dasgupta, Vice President of Global Brand, Product, and Content Marketing at IBM Services. And we are launching our Marketers Toolkit workshops on September 23rd. We're partnering with Content Marketing Institute on the first webinar called Treating Audiences Like Customers, Investing in Audience Personas, conducted by Robert Rose, and Chief Strategy Officer of the Content Advisory. So before we begin the panel, we would like to extend our thanks to our premier partner, Greenbook, for supporting the AMA New York year-round. Also, a special thanks to the AMA New York board and our team of talented volunteers for their continued contribution, commitment, and dedication. And finally, we highly value our AMA chapter partners, Austin, DC, and Triangle, for helping make this event happen. I would like to invite them to say a few words. Let's start with Austin, Jen Miller.
Hi, everybody. This is Jennifer Miller. I'm the president of the Austin AMA chapter, and we're so excited to get to hang out with you today. I'm really excited to partner with the New York chapter on this, and such a great, timely chapter, and hope you guys get the best out of it. I'm excited for it, I know. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. AMA DC President, Patrick King.
Hey everyone, Patrick King, President of AMA DC. We're doing a lot of really exciting things here in DC. We're going to kick off our mentorship program, which it's an annual program and it's really well attended. It's what initially got me back into AMA, and look what happened. So, so it's a pretty good event, and thank you for having this event.
Thank you. AMA Triangle President, Misty Wilson.
Hey guys, it's Misty Wilson, president of the AMA Triangle in the Raleigh-Durham area of North Carolina. This year, AMA Triangle is all about unleashing the magic of AMA membership, and that means bringing our members amazing education and new and exciting ways to connect. Like today, the feature of MarTech panel. So with that said, I really want to give a huge shout out to Esther for having us today, as well as our awesome and amazing moderator and panelists for chatting all things MarTech. So thank you guys.
Thank you. Thank you all. Today we have an all-star lineup of speakers. Our panel moderator is Scott Brinker, one of the most influential minds in MarTech. And panelists include Joe Rizzo, CEO of MarTech.io, Tim Hughes, CEO and co-founder of the LA Ignites, and Samuel Layton, VP Analytics and Marketing Technology at AMA Triangle. The panel will last about half an hour, and we'll leave another 20 minutes at the end for Q&A. So feel free to write your questions for our panelists on the chat. It's my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Scott Brinker. As VP Platform Ecosystem and at HubSpot, Scott shapes the company's platform strategy and leads business programs for its global technology partner ecosystem. In 2014, he launched the MarTech conference, where he currently serves as the events program chair, bringing together a community of thousands of senior marketing operations and technology professionals. Since 2008, Scott has also run chiefmartech.com with over 50,000 readers, analyzing topics at the intersection of marketing, technology, and management. As one of his projects, Scott created the marketing technology landscape, mapping the growth of the marketing technology industry from a few hundred vendors to 8,000. Thank you for joining us today, Scott. To provide some context and start this conversation, could you share an overview of your marketing technology landscape, Supergraphic, and how it's changed in the last decade?
Sure. Well, hi, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this. It is like seriously cool to be able to like participate with like New York, Texas, Carolina. I mean, just like DC all in one spot. Like, hey, isn't, you know, like the Zoom world wonderful? So here, let me share a version of this. I suppose for better and worse, most of you have seen some version of this graphic over the years, and I would like to start by apologizing for inflicting this upon you. It is truly a fascinating industry, marketing technology. And I just want to take a moment to put this in context, you know, for opening up the discussion with the amazing panelists we have. The exponential growth in solutions that are available to marketers. I mean, to this day, it still astounds me. When I did the first version of this graphic in 2011, you know, I'd found around 150 marketing technology solutions that were, you know, reasonably well known within the industry. And at the time, I mean, I along with everyone else I had shared it with, are like, oh my goodness, 150 marketing technologies. This is just insane. Surely it will consolidate, you know, and then just year over year to continue to grow and grow and grow. There's a lot of interesting dynamics as to why that is the case, you know, the changes in the way, you know, sort of the reduction of barriers to entry in software in general, the way in which marketing has also evolved, all these new innovations in like digital touch points and tactics and channels. But I think, yeah, I mean, for the purpose of today, it's really more about like, you know, how do we as marketers deal with this environment? Is it going to continue, you know, to be at this sort of scale? Is it going to grow larger? You know, are we finally going to start to see some consolidation? We'll get perspectives, you know, from Tim and Joe and Sam on this. But I thought the last slide I would just sort of leave you with before we open up that chat is, you know, seeing all the logo graphics is one thing, but, you know, when you like actually chart this out and you're like, oh my goodness, this was like 5,000% growth in the number of solutions that were offered. This is just astounding. I think we all know, we all feel that marketing has evolved and changed in such significant, you know, ways over the past decade, but it's often hard to quantify, you know, exactly how much it has changed, you know, and so this MarTech landscape is by no means, you know, the entirety of what's changed, but it becomes like one quantified measure of just recognizing, yeah, how different our world is than what it was 10 years ago. And the question is, what's it going to look like in the years ahead? So for that, please welcome the other panelists here. I want each of them to have a chance to just tell you a little bit about what they're doing. Sam, you want to kick this off?
Sure, thanks, Scott. So, hey, everyone. My name is Sam Mighton. I'm currently the VP of Analytics and Marketing Technology at the AMA Triangle chapter. And for my day job, I actually currently work at an agency called Cognetic that recently got acquired by another company called Brilio. And so I actually run and lead our optimization and CRO practice at Cognetic. But I actually have a pretty wide range of experience starting out as a middle school teacher, somehow convincing enough people that I was able to really learn more about analytics and marketing technologies. So I've had the opportunity to work at a lot of big companies. I've also worked at some startups as well, and really excited to be here.
Sam and I were joking in the green room before this started that, you know, there's probably some interesting parallels between like managing a class of middle school children and like managing a modern MarTech stack. So we may pull on that.
We'll definitely get into that. That's for sure.
Tim, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, you can probably tell from my accent that I'm not from one of the places like Washington or New York or anything like that. So I'm based in London. I'm the CEO and co-founder of an organization called DLA Ignite. And what we do is that we help organizations transform using social media. So my first book was Social Selling Techniques to Influence Buyers and Change Makers. It just appears. I don't know where the book comes from. Whenever I mention it, it just appears in the picture. And I'm really excited to be here, and I'm just amazed at how many people on Zoom. So really looking forward to it. Looking forward to the discussion.
Great. Joe, last but not least.
Scott, I've been a marketer for way too long, but for the past 20, 25 years, focusing in on marketing technology, both B2B, B2C, a bit of B2G, from Fortune 500 to startups where I am right now. Our company, MarTech.io, is focused in on using extended zero-party data to drive revenue for our clients. So we're focused solely in startup mode right now. That's where we're at, and we are neck deep in marketing technology.
Sounds good. Well, yeah, welcome to all of you. Let's dive right in, and yeah, I mean, where else to start? But given the craziness that 2020 has brought to our doorsteps, I'd love to get your perspective on how COVID-19 has been changing the MarTech industry from your point of view. What are some of the changes you're seeing this year that you didn't expect in MarTech?
Scott, let me kick that one off. And strangely, we haven't seen significant changes within MarTech. Now, overall marketing, yes, there are changes with regards to the budget, and there are budget cuts being driven by the CFO, naturally, with the advent of trying to preserve cash, preserve profitability as best as possible on industry and by industry basis. But when it comes to marketing technology, we're not seeing a lot of impact in this wave. I'm going to emphasize that, this wave of COVID-19. But if there is a second wave of COVID-19, then I think we can expect to see some changes to how an organization deploys marketing technology, and that will be driven by that CFO within the organization. That's when we'll start to see some cuts to the budget.
Sam, Tim, do you see the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing a massive change in the way that the buyer is acting. I don't know if anybody, you've got a pen and paper, Simon Kemp on LinkedIn, he does all the research for the Hootsuite We Are Social piece of research, which is a grand scheme of what's going on social media. There's now 4.57 billion people, that's 60% of the world's population on the internet. And there's 3.96 billion people, that's 51%. There's now more people on social media than not on social media. And we've seen that as a big transformation that takes place. So people are shifting from when this is what Simon says in his conclusion, is they're shifting that whereas social media was a destination, we're actually now seeing that's where we live. And we're now used to, I mean, I'm actually just back from France. I'm actually in quarantine. And it's the first time ever we've actually bought shopping off the internet. But, in the UK, shopping off the internet's doubled. And I don't know if you've seen those figures recently from McKinsey about people going online and buying. But, we've had 10 years worth of acceleration of people buying online in the last 3 months. So what I've been seeing is that big change in the people's behavior. And we're not going back to offices. I mean, we're on Zoom, and that's how we're going to be. And people are living online, and that's how we're going to do that. And that's going to make a massive change to the way that MarTech has to reach out and have conversations with people.
Yeah, and Tim, to follow up on that, when I think about what COVID has really done, among a lot of things, I think it's kind of accelerated a lot of trends that were already kind of starting, and it has just amplified them to a great extent. So a lot of companies that might have been dipping their toe in the water of maybe we should start thinking about this digital thing. Now they have to plunge headfirst into it. And so with that, I think a lot of companies and a lot of organizations are really trying to figure out, Now they have to start thinking about how all these tech stack pieces fit in with each other, and what kind of technology should they buy, and what kind of tools should they buy. And so I think one of the things that I've been seeing is a lot of organizations, I think they're trying to chase what they think is the solution by chasing the tool. And what they should really start thinking about is, just like COVID is changing everything, how can you better connect with your customers? Because if your customers are online and they're engaging on the internet a lot more, how do you really get their attention, and how can MarTech help that? So just like with a huge proliferation of all these different MarTech tools, if you think about all these other companies are vying for your attention. And so all these MarTech vendors are probably vying for your attention as well. And so if you think about, impact, and you think about your customers, that is what I think is going to help you kind of differentiate yourself, because now it's not just become, let's think about digital, it's become an existential crisis for a lot of organizations. So if you were dipping your toe in the water before, you now have to jump in without a life preserver. And so I think it really is important to, as companies think about MarTech, to be thinking ahead. And if they don't have that luxury because they haven't thought about it, now is the time to try to think about what is their clear strategy and really trying to jump in.
I think one of the things that interested me was the latest Edelman Trust Barometer, that's a fairly well trusted piece of research, and they're saying that users and buyers, 7 out of 10 of them are looking for trust. They're looking to build trust with brands, and I think that's even more so right now, where we're not talking about buyers. There's some research recently that was it 50-60% of people have switched brands. That would be a B2C thing. But also what we're seeing is that people want to actually build relationships with brands, but they want to build up trust, and they want to do that. And I think that's a dilemma that, Samuel, as you say, for organizations that actually want to transform, because actually 8,000 pieces of MarTech, I don't know about you, but I just find it completely confusing. Where do you start? And that's one of the things, what they're looking for are trusted advisors to help them. But right now it's confusing.
Indeed. Well, let me ask this, because this is the future of MarTech panels. I want to push you guys on peering into your crystal ball as best you can for like 12 to 18 months from now, whether you think, Joe, there will be a second wave or not. What do you think is one thing that you would expect to be different about MarTech, or how marketers are using MarTech a year and a half from now? And what should they, given that, what should they start doing today to get ready for that?
So let's assume that there will be a second wave. I think that you have to do that, right? And if there is, then you know that the CFO is going to be knocking on your door. And if that's the case, then you need to have not necessarily KPIs in order, but your ROI story, because you're going to need to justify all those past expenditures and those future expenditures. So if your ROI story is in place, then you're in a better place than not, right? But what to do 12 to 18 months down the road? Well, I think the focus is going to be on not necessarily finding new customers and bringing them in through the use of marketing technology, but using that marketing technology, and this pivots off of what Tim said, to further build relationships with consumers, with your clients, whether you're B2B or B2C. So it's going to be a matter of looking at not only your stack and is it efficient? Are there redundancies? Is the integration clean? But it's also looking at the input, and that is data. Is your data clean? Is your data toxic? What do you need to do in order to have a robust consumer data platform, database, so that you can optimize your efforts in making sure that you grow your current client base by cross-selling, upselling new products, the different variations of products, making sure that you are treating your customer base, your current customer base properly, and building revenue through that strategy. So, 12 to 18 months down the road, Scott, I could see if you're able to get past that ROI gateway, can you leverage your current data and your current stack to drive more revenue from your current clients?
So Tim, if I really liked you bringing up the Edelman Trust Index there too. Makes total sense. Under current circumstances, trust is a valuable commodity in relationships with our customers. Do you feel like there's a capability, and this might be technical or it might be how we're actually leveraging the technology, that marketers are missing or they're going to need to get much better at, like over this next 12 to 18 months?
So I agree with Joe about, I'd actually say you need to have some KPIs in your back pocket and you need to be measuring. From what we're seeing, all of our clients, marketing have basically been called into a meeting and saying, what are you doing? And sometimes, you'll get well, email isn't working, so we'll buy any other email marketing product. But that puts off the decision, actually, that it's not the email marketing product that's not working. It's the fact that the content or what you're sending out is boring, and I'm being polite. So I think, some of the things that people need to do is that there needs to be a change in content. And certainly what you were doing pre-COVID, I've seen a lot of people change. As we came through lockdown in March, there was a lot of the same content that came out that people have been writing in February. But we're now seeing a change. We've moved from that, we'll be helping and we'll be empathetic. And I think we're starting to see people be a lot more, change the content, but it needs to be insightful. It needs to be educational. If you want to build trust with people, what you need to be doing, not necessarily making them laugh, but you need to be, relevant is a bit of a cliche, but you need to be insightful and you need to be educational, because certainly what we've been seeing over the last 6 months is that people are looking for answers. So this is a piece of content, and this is a great example where people are looking for answers. Wherever we've written a piece of content where we've said, here is a problem that you've got with COVID, here's an answer, we've got 10 times the number of basically shares, not just the number of reads. So I think there needs to be that shift, and we need to move away from helping people, but to provide relevance and insight.
So both Tim and Joe mentioned here, like the KPIs and really being able to make the argument, if you need it now, absolutely, but expect 12 from 18 months from now, you're gonna need it even more. Sam, given that you've got now multiple titles, with like analytics and data in the title, like, where do you think marketers are at on, actually being able to tell the data-driven story of where they're getting ROI or impact on customers? And if they're not there yet, what should they be thinking about to get better at that?
Yeah, so there's a phrase that I'm fond of that I think was said by Peter Drucker, who said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I think if we take that a step further as marketers, I think often when in relation to marketing technology, the way I think about culture and the way I think about marketing technology, I think culture tends to amplify like the tools and technologies that we already have in place. And so if there isn't a culture of actually being able to get your hands dirty and then to also be able to ask questions, where I think sometimes it does take some vulnerability to say as a marketer, I don't necessarily know the answer. And maybe at this point, I don't have the tool or technology to answer that. But you want to try to ask those questions, and you want to try to dig, be okay with digging into the data. And maybe, and I think if we think about like the next 12 to 18 months, one trend that I see kind of continuing to play out is, I know for data science, there's kind of this concept of like the rise of a citizen data scientist. So someone who might use like low code or no code or tools to really try to emulate at least a little bit what kind of a data scientist does and really tries to pull insights from. And I think as marketers, they're probably going to start seeing more and more tools that allow you to do that, or allow you to kind of connect pieces of marketing technology to each other a little bit more easily, or really try to be able to uncover insights a bit more easily, because oftentimes the data is so siloed between this tool and this tool and that tool. But you have to kind of start with, the customer, and you have to start with what insights are you trying to get, rather than trying to chase that tool or that technology. And so I think the more that you can lean into the marketing mindset of getting into the head of your customers and asking questions, I think the more powerful the insights you'll be able to generate. And I think that the more questions you have, and not being afraid to ask those questions, I think can really continue to help you grow your skill set as a marketer, and then also maybe get the tools you need to actually help you answer those questions, rather than trying to trace the tool or technology and then using the tool, because the tool is just a tool at the end of the day. So, if you have a hammer, everything is going to look like a nail, right? So you have to kind of think about what the end goal is, and how you can really try to achieve that.
Scott, if you don't mind, I'd like to jump in for a second and dovetail off of what Sam said. 12 to 18 months down the road, if I were to recommend something, an act of self-preservation for the marketer vis-a-vis marketing technology, it would be a work around deconstruction than reconstruction. That is, taking a look at all of the tools that you have, deconstruct, and then reconstruct around exactly what Sam has talked about, and that is the customer, the consumer. And taking a fresh look as to what to do and how to do it. So assuming that you have your KPIs and your ROI story in place, take advantage of this, I'm not going to call it downtime, but take advantage of this lull, I guess.
Calibration period.
Yeah.
Reset.
And reignite your marketing stack. Take a hard look at what you have. Deconstruct, reconstruct around what the consumer is looking at and what the consumer is doing today.
So go ahead.
So that just got me thinking. So some of you might notice that I'm relatively tan, or a little bit more tan than usual, because I was at the beach last week, finally, after not leaving the house for a couple of months. And when I was on the beach, I got the chance to read Wired magazine, and there was actually this article that was really interesting, because it was about a person who went to, who was a Chinese American who went to China. She was born and raised in America, but then she went to kind of like a startup accelerator for herself. And so what she was able to see was kind of like the chaos of democracy, but like where has come from like westernization, and then also like the importance and the rigor of like what happens when you have like a more centralized control. And when you think of like I think what Joe was mentioning, like the reconstruction and deconstruction, just kind of got me start thinking about, I think the other trend we also see in MarTech is, do you have a centralized process or a decentralized process? Mm-hmm. And so, when you have a centralized process, you have control, but you might lose the ability to really leapfrog or kind of keep up with all these changes that are happening. When you're decentralized, then I think it could be a big challenge to try to, really maintain governance and make sure everyone is on the same page. And so I think, as Joe was mentioning, that reconstruction, deconstruction, and really thinking about that push and pull that you have, and as you build your MarTech stack, trying to reconcile those two things is really challenging. But if you kind of, again, have that mindset where you keep your customer at the center of what you do, and you use this time for COVID as an opportunity for reinvention and experimentation. Had to put that plug for experimentation there. But if you use it as a chance to kind of grow and build, then I think it could be an incredibly powerful thing, because staying where you are today might not be working. And so when you have a chance to try new things and be scrappy, if you do it with the proper culture and governance in mind, I think it can lead to some pretty great things.
All right, so if I quickly summarize where we're at right now, largely the consensus is you want to make sure that your MarTech stack, you've got some sort of mechanism of being able to demonstrate with data its value, its impact, what you're doing. I think, Tim, you really, emphasized, I believe correctly, that it's not the tool, it's what you're doing with the tool. And in a lot of ways, we underestimate how much leverage there is in the craft we apply to using these tools. And then I think, both, Joe and Sam, this idea of saying, hey, this is actually a great time to rethink your stack. And is there a way to even simplify it? So I think that's a really solid foundation. I guess, a couple of the questions we'd sort of talked about earlier that maybe, again, look a little bit further down the road is people get these metrics in place. They're getting better about the craft, placing the right emphasis. They're now building from a more solid foundation. As they start building up on that foundation and they're thinking, okay, maybe we need an extra tool to do this capability, I'd love you just what would your recommendations be that once they're ready to start building up again, what would be the lens they should take to justify, do we actually need another tool, and how should we make that decision?
So let me jump in on that, Scott. And I referenced this earlier. That lens has to be, I think, around data. And there are two aspects of it. First, has everything to do with data privacy, something that is upon us in such a big way, and it's almost as if it's this tsunami coming, and you don't see it on the horizon. It is coming, and you take a look at the CCPA in California, GDPR in EMEA, what the marketer needs to do over the 12 to 18 months. What are those additional tools? That has to have something to do with preserving data privacy for your users. The second aspect of that is leveraging all that data, because the stack, what's going to happen in 12 to 18 months? Is there going to be this, this miracle that's going to come around the corner, or from a marketing technology standpoint? I don't think so. But I do believe that those input, the power generator to that marketing stack is data. So you're going to have to take a fresh look at a new lens to that data that you have. And I'm referring to your consumer/client data. How to leverage that in order to drive more revenue for your organization.
So I'm going to jump in here because we're coming to the point in time where we want to open up to questions from the audience, and we've actually got a few that are coming in perfectly timed for this. So a lot of this talk about using data to actually measure the performance, what's working, what's not. So Angela Van Hollen was asking if you had any recommendations on tools for attribution, but also more do you have a favorite formula or method among these many different tools for really knowing what's working? That she notes that last touch attribution, for instance, doesn't really speak to the journey. Joe, Sam, Tim, thoughts?
For me, what I've been seeing is kind of the rise of the customer data platform. So CDPs, customer data platforms, and customer management platforms, I think they're becoming just like how tag managers are a way to kind of manage how you put a lot of things on your website or on your app, and they've kind of become the standard. I think eventually those customer data platforms are also going to become the standard as well, because what they essentially do is they allow you to connect multiple data points about your customers and put them in a core place. because without that, attribution is always going to be a bit tricky, because maybe you have a tool like Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics. You can track maybe, you know, and you can even do different modeling mixes in those tools. So you can kind of see, okay, what does last touch say about that email campaign? What does first touch say about that social media campaign? But then there's also maybe all of the other stuff that happens after they encounter your website or your app. And so how do you capture all that? They might go to a CRM. How do you make sure your CRM connects to your analytics tools? How do you make sure all that connects to everything else? And so I think one tool that I'm really fond of specifically is a tool, for example, called Segment. Segment is like kind of also become like a pretty big standard in terms of like centralizing a lot of your customer data, and being able to use Segment where you basically put all your data into Segment, and then from Segment you can then connect it to like hundreds of different tools out there. And it's become a really important way for marketers to kind of have a complete profile of what your customers are doing. But besides that, again, CMP, customer data platforms and those platforms I think are going to be really important.
All right, next question.
Can I just say, as a CEO, Scott, that the only measure I have is revenue?
Yeah, but how do you attribute it? Let me tug on that one, because I agree. Ultimately, revenue is the right you know, metric at the top, but you've got all these different touch points, including a lot of social touch points. Like, how do you see the folks you work with? Like, what are the best ones doing to really be able to correlate yeah, those interactions?
I mean, I think it's a really good question, because I think up until now, I've not seen very many customers do it. You know, it's like there's some stuff that goes on the top of the funnel and sales sells some stuff, and everybody was happy. And then we went into lockdown, and now it's kind of back to Joe's comment about, you know, we need to be measuring this stuff. So even if that's campaign codes in CRM, or what Sam was talking about of, you know, making sure that you're measuring it through the process, you've got to do it. At the end of the day, as a CEO, if you're going to come and ask me for more money, I want to know what revenue you're going to generate.
Fair enough. All right, we had some great questions coming through here. Rodrigo Reyes had asked about the growing adoption of no-code tools and the degree to which that might create more friction with IT areas where their main concern is like security. I mean, like Sam, you had mentioned, like, you know, the citizen data scientist.
Yeah.
Like, does that mean anyone in the company gets access to any of the data they want to do their own spelunking, or how do we balance that empowerment, you know, with IT issues?
Well, I think that's a little bit of what our country is going through right now, because democracies are messy, right? You know, chaos is kind of inherent in the process. So I don't know if there's necessarily a clear answer, because I think each organization is different. But because sometimes, I know in my optimization practice, like a lot of times that's what you see, where you might start with an optimization team of one person who starts doing tests, and then does it without asking permission, and then that's how things move forward. But then that butts up against, you know, rules and governance, and wait, I can't believe you changed the color of that button. You just tanked our conversion metrics by 25%. What are you doing? So there's always going to be a lot of tension. So I think, as just a general guidepost, the way that I would think about it is, how can you, I think two things. One is, you know how important or how busy those IT teams are. And you know how now you kind of seeing like Gartner and a lot of other organizations showing that marketing is now even taking a larger budget, or like a larger share of the budget than IT in some instances in a lot of large organizations. And so I think if you, you know, if you come in with a sense of humbleness, where you know that they're kind of the key, they all hold the keys to the castle, and you say, how can we, what do you need from us to make sure that there's kind of a proper process in place? I really think just by inviting them to the table, and then kind of having an open conversation about what your needs are, what you want to do, and then eventually kind of describe, okay, with this tool, what will this tool do that you can't currently do today? And I think if they notice that there is a genuine need and you're really trying to help your customers or your clients, I think that can go a long way towards demonstrating that you want to be a partner with the IT team rather than be against them, because I think sometimes that does tend to happen.
Just to add to that, Scott, you know, the classic argument, best of breed versus platform.
Yeah.
The platform, HubSpot, could act as that umbrella to vet those applications so as to mitigate that dissonance that comes from IT. So if you know, that exchange of vetted partners from that platform has already been sanctioned, and if that sanctioning body, Salesforce, HubSpot, whomever, deems that application to be safe, secure, etc., then that goes a long way in swaying IT to come on board and accept those third-party applications, because it's through that vetted organization that does all of that vetting.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value to that. I think still the challenge will become, I suspect, I mean, the question was in the context of IT pushing on back on this, but I wonder if it's an even bigger change, frankly, for marketing leadership to make the decision of how much freedom they give people throughout the organization to, as you were saying, Sam, just do experimentation and try things. And with the knowledge that that means a lot of people trying a lot of things, you're gonna have a lot of things that don't work, and you have to be okay with that, because that's part of the process of how you discover the things that do. All right, but I want to take us to a different question here. We could do a whole session just on experimentation. I love that. John Rizzo, it's like, this is a perfect question for you, Joe. How is the removal of third-party cookies going to be affecting the marketer, and particularly with MarTech? How do we think that's going to change, you know, help or hurt?
So the removal of third-party cookies is almost top level. Excuse me. There are so many ways that ad tech can identify visitors that, you know, third-party cookies aren't really necessary. So the problem is always going to exist. But, you know, with the removal of third-party cookies, and really that's an ad tech issue, that filters back into channel spending. There's going to be increased emphasis on your data. You know, your database, what exists within your, and Sam referred to the CDP or the HubSpot database or the Salesforce database. You know, there's going to be increased emphasis on how to manage that. And I believe that the best way to do that, and this is really radical and deserves its own discussion, is to give the consumer the ability to capture their own data and provide the ability to allow you as the marketer to access that data. Now that bypasses so much of that nonsense, you know, especially around data privacy regulation. You know, now, you know, once you give the consumer the ability to own that data, then you don't have to, you know, there is no data privacy regulation because they're regulating it for you. So third-party cookies, you know, it's an afterthought. It really is, because there's so many different ways to attack that. But there are solutions out there.
All right, so I'm going to give folks here a nudge if they want to put in a few more questions before we come to the top of the hour. But while we're waiting for those to come in, I want to step back and just ask you a question that I get asked all the time, and I would love your perspective on this. But I'm going to make this as a bit of a trick question, because I'm going to ask you a follow-up at the same time. The question is, are we going to see consolidation in the MarTech landscape? You know, why? And then the follow-up question I'd like you to weigh in on as well is, do we think there's going to be more software in the world overall, not just MarTech, but just in general? Do we think the amount of software, different kinds of software in the world are going to grow, or is that also going to shrink?
You know, I'll go first. Availability of capital right now is significant. There will be, and we're already seeing the M&A activity. Consolidation infers that there's a reduction in the number of vendors. No, that won't happen. Why? Because there's capital available to provide to those startups so as to continue to innovate, to continue to grow. Even in the era of COVID-19, the marketing technology is paramount. That is, when it comes to, you know, fat and skeleton, that's the skeleton. You know, you're not cutting that. So there'll be continued flow of capital to startups, to fund M&A activities, for IPOs, to you know, drive more funds. So you know, there will be more vendors. So you're gonna have to find a way to enlarge that damn graphic. I don't know how you go from 8,000 to 10,000, but it's gonna happen.
I was hoping you were going to say it would come down to 10, because that would make that job so much easier. Sam, Tim, any thoughts on this?
I mean, you asked the question really well, Scott, which is that there's two things. One is, will the list consolidate? And I mean, we're already seeing layoffs. We're already seeing companies disappearing, but there's always going to be someone with a new idea for a brand new app. And the amount of VC spend that's going on in California, I don't think it's reduced, even though, you know, COVID-19, it's just being spent in different areas. So there's always going to be someone with a new app.
Sam?
Yeah, so literally hot off the press, I just got an alert on my Slack that one big A/B testing vendor is called Optimizely, and just 10 minutes ago, they just announced they just got acquired. And so, which is pretty crazy. So, and you look at what's been happening with scale. And so if you look at kind of the bigger trends with COVID, the companies that are doing really well, they're doing even better. So if you look at Amazon and Apple and Microsoft and Walmart and Target, they've been actually hitting record revenue numbers. And smaller companies, they've been struggling a lot. And they've been shutting down, or they get acquired, or they kind of get nimble enough to kind of find a niche. And so what I think personally, what I think we'll kind of continue seeing is oftentimes, you know, this was made fun of in the TV show Silicon Valley, but it's like your Uber for X, right? So you're trying to define like what your marketing technology tool, your MarTech for X, right? You're going to be that platform or that thing. So I think there will be kind of this, like, if you kind of think of like a whole body approach, I think that there's going to be kind of some consolidation around like those big platforms. And then if you look at some of like the fastest growing companies, like a lot of them are insights driven companies, but they're platform driven companies. So Airbnb is a platform, Uber is a platform, Lyft is a platform, Facebook Marketplace is a platform, and they connect buyers and sellers. And so I think you're probably going to start seeing a lot of companies that are continuing to position themselves as the platform for email, or the platform for CRM, or the platform for something. And then you're going to see a lot of niche players that I think are going to continue to keep growing and building. And I think like Joe mentioned, yeah, there's going to be a lot more capital, and there's always going to be the next great widget. And that next great widget could be that killer feature for that platform. So I think you're going to start seeing that both kind of consolidation of platforms, but I wouldn't be surprised if, unfortunately, Scott, it becomes the MarTech 10K, the MarTech 15K, and then, you know, who knows where it's going to go from there. So what I would say is,
you guys are going to give me some hope that that job was getting easier. All right, well, there's something you brought up here that's really interesting. I just want to tug on this a bit, because I do agree with generally the consensus among the three of you that, you know, there's likely to be consolidation among the larger players from a platform perspective, but that we are still likely going to live in a world where there's just going to be this continuous renewal of new startups with new ideas. How should marketers think about working with MarTech startups? Because it feels like on one hand, yeah, you get that opportunity to take advantage of maybe some new capability or channel or tactic that your competitors aren't doing yet. But at the same time, yeah, I mean, you know, taking a bet on a startup and a smaller company is a risky thing. How should they balance that calculus?
Well, given the fact that I'm at a MarTech startup right now, so from
A little bit of bias there. You're like, go with the startup.
You're not biased then, are you?
so, totally understood. What does what does a prospect look to? What should a prospect look to with regards to a startup? There has to be some level of vetting, some level of acceptance, whether that's use cases, whether that's case studies, from live examples, etc. Part and parcel to that would be, has this application been accepted by a platform and is a part of their ecosystem? Again, referring back to the exchange of the partners to the HubSpots and the Salesforces of this world. The risk is there. How do you, as a startup, how's the startup mitigate that risk so that the marketer can feel comfortable in saying, yeah, let me test that, mitigate the risk and reduce any cost. So from a marketer standpoint, no cost. I don't want to pay anything for this risk. I get that. So marketers should look to mitigating the risk, seeing if there's outside vetting, see if there are outside examples.
If I can add to what Joe is saying, I think we have to make sure that there is a culture of experimentation within marketing. And when there's experimentation, we did this, it didn't work. Okay, we'll do something else. And that has to be, that has to come down from the top down. And if we're not, we need to be educating people because things change. Things change since February, and they're going to change again. And we just need to make sure that we've got that culture.
All right, we've got a question from Tammy Bruzon, who wants to push us in our thinking here. She's like asking, is there something in innovative tech happening right now that could throw all of these predictions out the window? Anyone want to take that?
Yes, I actually think that we don't realize how much the world has changed through COVID-19. And even though, and one of the problems that we have is that all of our research is 3 months out of date. So, the McKinsey figures are from like June and July. I can't emphasize enough, whatever you think COVID has done to transform society and business, you're not thinking hard enough. And I still think that we'll look back in December and go, wow, that was one hell of a year. And I still just think, the things have changed so much and we don't realize it yet. Go.
The only thing I can think of, Tim, something tangible is legislation. Is there something that's coming down the pike that's happening from a legislative standpoint, whether it's on a country edict or whether it's law written in by Congress, whatever, that would drive significant change. Case in point, what we're doing, data privacy is a huge issue, has a significant impact on what the marketer is doing. That is legislative driven. It's trend driven, but it's also legislation driven. So in terms of Scott, what could throw a monkey wrench into the works. One thing I can, non-technology standpoint, what's happening at the governmental level.
Scott, if I can actually add something to that, one of the things that's changed is that if I say to you, the iPhone is the best phone in the world, the first thing that you'll do is that you'll go online and you'll search. You'll read articles, you'll join, you'll read content, you'll join groups, you'll have discussions, you'll talk to your mates on Facebook, and you'll come back to me and you'll say, no, it's not, it's a Samsung something, 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 something. And that change that's taken place in the buying process, that if you're using interruption, email, cold calling, advertising as a way of reaching out to people, the first thing that someone's going to do when you reach out to them is go online and check what you said is true. So I'm a big fan of physical music. So I get a Facebook ad that says, buy these CDs, they're a special price. Immediately I go online, I can get them cheaper on Amazon. And all of the consumers are doing that. And that's one of the things that's fundamentally changed. And we're more used to it. My mother, who's 82, she runs a wine group on Zoom. She has there's somebody who's volunteered to basically put all the bottles of wine at the front door so they can actually drink the wine. But you'll say, yeah, but everybody's doing that, and they are. And that's one of the things that I think that we're looking back in 5 years' time. It's one of the changes that we're seeing taking place.
All right. Well, listen, we are coming up to the end of this incredible event, but I wanted to give each of you one last 30 seconds. The audience who came here wanting to know future of MarTech, would be a 30-second summary you'd give them of take this one thing away. Sam?
I think for me, it's don't be afraid to experiment and don't be afraid to take risks. It's a really messy world out there, especially now for a variety of reasons. And so I would say with all these different tools, it might seem overwhelming, but if you have your compass and your North Star being, your goals and what you want to achieve, I think that will help guide you. As a teacher, going back to one quick teacher concept, we had this idea in mind whenever we taught a lesson, which was to backwards plan our lessons. So we think about, we begin with the end in mind, and then we create a lesson, based on the goal we want to achieve. And so I think MarTech's the same way. So while a lot of this might seem overwhelming, don't be afraid to take risks, to try things, be vulnerable with the change, and just be okay not knowing the answer. And you don't know the answer with other people, which I think could be a really great thing.
Tim?
I think the one thing that marketers are trying to grapple with right now is the fact that everybody markets on the same message, which is buy my product because it's great. And if you look at you and all your competitors, you're probably saying the same thing. You're not standing out. And I think the one thing that you need to grapple with is, what are you going to do to differentiate? Because since the beginning of time, since even Joe started in marketing, the thing that we needed to do was basically be different from everybody else. There are, I looked the other day, there are something like 15 million people on LinkedIn with the title of marketing manager. None of them are standing out. They're all the same. You're just a zebra in a herd of zebras. And we need to be in a situation where we're not saying, buy my product because it's great.
Joe, you get the last word.
So I think it was in Spider-Man where I read the sentence, with great power comes great responsibility. And because we as marketers have invested so much capital into marketing technology, that we have now become most powerful. And as a result, we are exposed because we need to justify those expenditures. So look to your KPIs, but especially with regards to ROI, because the knock on the door is happening. It will happen from the CFO, and that you're going to have to justify all of those dollars being spent, especially in the time that we're in right now.
Well said. Listen, Sam, Tim, Joe, thank you so much for all of your insights and candor. I guess, Esther, I turn it back to you.
Thank you, Scott, for moderating such an engaging panel. And thanks to our panelists, Joe, Tim, and Sam. And thank you all for being here with us today. As a final note, if you enjoyed this panel, I recommend you to consider becoming an AMA New York member and join this dynamic organization to have access to essential resources for marketers, expand your network and knowledge, elevate your leadership profile by volunteering, and network among your peers. Thank you all very much, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
See ya.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.